Planet of the Apes, a dystopian future in the aftermath of a worldwide nuclear war that devastates the planet. Humans are scarce, apes are the new apex predators. They are our masters, and it is us who are kept in cages. Sure, the Planet of the Apes is a much-loved fantasy franchise, but it is a bit far-fetched. The apes could never really take over. Or could they? Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions, the channel that loves to ask all kinds of zany stuff, and serious stuff because the world is basically a combination of zany and serious. I'm your host Rebecca Felgate, and today I'm asking, what if the Planet of the Apes was real? Before we start, I want to ask you guys a fun question. If you could choose an animal to take over the world, which would you choose? I'm gonna go for dogs. Planet of the dogs! Wouldn't that just be beautiful? Puppies everywhere. Yes. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Also, while you're down there, why don't you leave a thumbs up on this video and share it with a friend. So do make sure you watch right to the end, as I'm going to be answering some of your comments. Alright, in the Planet of the Apes, it is the year 1978. Astronauts then travel to the year 3978 and crash land on a new planet that is overrun by intellectually sentient apes. The apes treat humans like vermin, killing them, enslaving them, or using them for science experiments. Not to spoil a plot from over 50 years ago or anything, but it turns out that the planet is actually Earth after nuclear war. So, what if this was real? Well, let's suspend our disbelief and say that this actually did and could happen for a moment. Life would basically suck for us humans. My question really is though, where is all the tech? Planet of the Apes was released in 1968 before technology infiltrated humanity's day-to-day lives. Have the apes not reached the point where they want some wearable tech? Where's ape Instagram and ape YouTube? Do apes watch daytime TV? Their sole purpose seems to be exterminating humans. Like, isn't that exhausting? When do they get the time to Netflix and ape chill? Let's just leave that one for a moment. So assuming Planet of the Apes is real, how are those apes farming in a post-apocalyptic society? Good on them for finding an alternative food source. Ain't no ape McDonald's. Maybe they have mastered healthy eating and sustainability. It might suck for humans, but like, maybe apes would be better at looking after planet Earth than we are. I didn't see the apes burning any fossil fuels in the movies. Maybe we should just get over ourselves and leave them to it. We've had our chance and we destroyed the world with nuclear war. That being said, the apes do still have some caste system beef. The gorillas are the military police, hunters and the workers, aka the brawn. The orangutans oversee the government, science and religion, with the chimpanzees mostly being scientists, so these two are the brains. What about the super smart bonobos though? They're lumped in with the rest of the chimpanzees, but we all know that they would run the show. Anyway, my point being, where there is a caste system, there is discontent. If the surviving humans were clever, we could masterfully learn to play them off against one another and wait for the impending civil war. Then we could use the opportunity to rise up and overthrow the apes. Also, I think that we need to mention that at this time, if Planet of the Apes was real, we would have mastered time and space travel, so while life may suck on planet Earth, who knows where else humans could be colonizing? The long and short of it is that even if other animals could develop intellectual sentience, humans would notice before it became a threat to us. And can it even happen while we're messing hard with animals' natural habitats and practically halting their evolution? Planet of the Apes has this happening after a nuclear war, so maybe it could. But if the human race is devastated, wouldn't the animal kingdom be too? So, back to our point about technology. Planet of the Apes was the last outpost in the maybe the animals will rise up against us school of thought. Is it not more likely that we'll have created our own successor in the form of machines? That was an evolution we never saw coming in the late 1960s, but the top brains like the late Stephen Hawking have predicted could be the biggest threat to our status as the most productive and intelligent beings. Planet of the Droids, mate, it's on. So, Planet of the Apes, do you guys think it could ever happen? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Or do you think it could be Planet of the Robots, or maybe Planet of the Lizards, or the Blobfish? Ugh, terrifying. Also, while you're down there leaving a comment, why don't you guys leave a thumbs up on this video and share it with a friend?
Have you ever thought about our ape relatives and wondered if evolution is an ongoing and ever relentless process, then why haven't they already changed into some form of proto-human and started building fires and carving spears, cultivating all manner of technologies that can hurtle them toward a similar kind of civilization? And oh no, because before you know it, the last remnants of human civilization are being rounded up by hordes of horse-riding apes waving machine guns in the air. Alright, maybe things have gotten quickly out of hand, and I'll gladly tell you that's not how evolution works, but still, it's an interesting thought, isn't it? Hello internet, what's going on? And once again, welcome back to the most inquisitive channel on YouTube, life's biggest questions. As per usual, I'll be your disembodied floating voice Jack Finch, as today we curiously ask the question, what if apes evolved past humans? For the curious amongst you, that scene was of course from 2014's Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, where this time Caesar wrestled to maintain dominance over his vast community of intelligent apes as pockets of humanity struggled to survive the outbreak of the devastating simian flu. And slowly the age of ape kind started to emerge from the wilderness, and I'm not saying that would necessarily happen in this hypothetical situation, but I'm also not saying that. Also, how amazing is Andy Serkis' performance in that film? And if our hypothetical apes had a Caesar, we'd pretty much all be screwed. But before we dive into this question, we first have to address the elephant in the room and pick apart the actual evolutionary sequence of events that explains away exactly why apes haven't already evolved past humans. And whilst it may seem like an obvious one, hey, we might learn something new in the process. The fact of the matter remains, we are apes. You, me, your parents, your best friend from high school, the weatherman, every single human being on this planet is a direct descendant of a shared common species that lived about 14 million years ago, and together in our fun little branch of the genetic tree, we share that distant cousin with Neanderthals, Australopithecus, Homo florensis, orangutans, gorillas, bonobos, and chimpanzees. We are all apes, and together we make up the taxonomic family hominids, also known as the Great Apes. We, however, obviously changed quite a lot on our evolutionary journey, and so humans, although we are still considered hominid, we are also in fact the only hominin species with an N currently alive on our fair planet called Earth, given the fact that all of the others died out to make way for modern humans. And if you think that's confusing, take it up with the anthropologists, please. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so if we're from the same little branch as the Great Apes, why aren't orangutans doing their thing and forming orangutan villages and cultivating their own banana harvest? And the fact of the matter is, they haven't ever needed to, and neither did their ancestors. Not now, and not even 10 million years ago, where their own lineage began. Chimpanzees and bonobos alike are supremely adapted to their environment, and they survived for the better. But the key difference is, our ancestors needed to change. You see, it's easy to think about evolution as a linear, progressive kind of thing, constantly twisting and writhing toward greater and greater levels of complexity, but the reality is, evolution doesn't care. Evolution doesn't have a destination, it just keeps going. It keeps living, and ever since that single-celled amoeba split off into another, those exact same conditions are what eventually sprouted us, me and you and everyone else. And also, those are the same conditions that sprouted out our ape cousins too. Those awesome hairy fellas that fascinate us endlessly with their uncanny levels of curiosity, where the reason it feels like we're staring into a mirror when we look at apes is because we kind of are. The key similarity between the two of us is monkey see, monkey do. Living in trees worked for apes, so they stayed, but it didn't quite work for us, so we left. Simple. You see, evolution doesn't have a destination, there's no end game to it. And even if there was, which there isn't, humanity is certainly not the pinnacle of the evolutionary process, no matter how much we'd like to think we are. Evolution favors simplicity. To quote Jeff Goldblum as Dr. Ian Malcolm, life finds a way. The reason that humans walk on two legs is because our hominin Australopithecus relatives evolved human-like hips that let them walk on 2 feet and carry things across vast distances. Evolution did that because it was a useful skill for collecting and foraging food, and those that had that trait survived to carry it on. And those shared successful traits are what eventually gave rise to Homo sapiens roughly 200,000 years ago. Our species who were able to survive in pretty much any environment, under any kind of circumstances, and still are to this day. For the time being, anyway. And yet still our ape cousins continue to live on in trees and the canopies of the deep jungle, because it was still as evolutionarily successful, and it still is today. However, let's get back to that elephant in the room, because currently on Earth there are fewer than 500,000 of our simian cousins alive, and 4 out of 6 of the great apes are considered critically endangered. And that's not because of evolution failing to do its job, that's because of us. More than 5 billion humans live in countries with primates, and that ever-encroaching expansion of population is obliterating the habitat of the great apes. Through relentless logging, mining, hunting, and the illegal pet trade, and most critically, climate change. In fact, the stark reality is that even hypothetically speaking, humanity would completely wipe out our great ape cousins before evolution had a chance to kickstart life finding any kind of way. The truth of the matter is that it's pretty damn bleak, and the only hypothetical parameters of apes ever evolving past humanity is if some all-powerful cosmological force snapped their fingers and we all disappeared in an instant. Even under the most extreme circumstances, apes would never evolve past humans, because the truth is, we are the apes that evolve past the apes. The rest of our great ape family. Anyway, as far as we know, there has never been a species on Earth that has the capacity to understand the evolutionary process as comprehensively as we humans do. But maybe that's the exact point. Maybe life finding its way is to enable us to ensure the survival of our most vulnerable species and prevent them from disappearing entirely. You see, that's because there are still many things that can be done to save the great apes. And yeah, that includes us humans, too. Well, there we have it, our long and short answer to the question, what if apes evolved past humans? They couldn't, because they're happy living in trees and eating bananas, but we should really do something about how we treat their environment. Also, we are apes.
Ever since Charles Darwin wrote his book On the Origin of Species in 1859, the world's leading scientists have been examining the development of many animal species, most predominantly humans. Much of this research has been focused on our most important survival mechanism, our brain. This is the main characteristic that sets us apart from the rest of the animal kingdom. But as we see one of our closest relatives, the chimpanzee, showing signs of increased intelligence, many find themselves wondering if they will eventually overtake us. So get ready, it's time to ask the question, will chimps ever be smarter than humans? Well, some scientists claim that this is already the case. For instance, one 2012 study claims that a female chimpanzee was found to have higher intelligence than the average high school student. However, this is hardly the most scientific of papers, as the proof for the lack of intelligence in high school students included things like inability to pull one's pants up and always starting drama. While some claim chimps to be smarter than humans in an attempt at humor, it's clear that humans currently have more intelligence. Or is it? While many scientists study animal intelligence, and countless papers have been published on the subject, some researchers are of the opinion that we lack the ability to properly gauge the intelligence of animals. In his book, Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are?, Frans de Waal describes an alternate view of intelligence. Rather than a ladder of intelligence with humans at the top, he suggests viewing it as a bush with branches of intelligence. Certain animals have higher and lower levels of several different types of intelligence, but that doesn't mean one is inherently more intelligent than any other. A gazelle may not be great at calculus, but put a predator anywhere near it and it will show you just how clever it can be. De Waal and several others believe that to compare something as vague as intelligence between species is folly. That isn't to say that humans don't have their own advantages over chimps. When discussing our own intelligence is often divided into 8 types: musical rhythmic and harmonic, visual spatial, verbal linguistic, logical mathematical, bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalistic. While chimps may be able to compete with humans on a select few of these, such as visual spatial or bodily kinesthetic, if we were to compare humans and chimpanzees based on performance in these areas, humanity would come out on top. Our superior verbal, logical, and interpersonal intelligence would likely be the difference. However, this method of testing is extremely biased in favor of humans, as it was created with humans in mind, so it doesn't exactly give us a clear picture of the situation. For the sake of argument, let's assume that we are able to compare chimp and human intelligence. Will chimpanzees ever be smarter than humans? It seems unlikely. Despite the advances we've seen chimps make in terms of tools, in the same time, humanity has progressed much further. If the current trends continued, there is little chance that chimpanzees could reach the same level of intelligence as humans. But as unlikely as this may be, it is not impossible. As humans become increasingly dependent on technology, it may be that we will begin to depend less and less on our own brains, since computers can complete most mental tasks more efficiently. If this was the case and humanity somehow managed to survive for the millions of years it would take chimps to evolve past us, then it is possible. But as stated in our video, How Long Will Humans Exist For?, it could be that there simply won't be enough time left for us to allow evolution to do its work. One more realistic option that could lead chimps to be smarter than us is genetic engineering. We've all seen or heard of Planet of the Apes. If we were to, pardon the pun, monkey around with the genetic structure of these apes, there is every possibility that we could create a chimp that is smarter than a human. And if this happens, we may need to start recruiting little girls with superpowers. Yes, that's a Mojo Jojo reference. No regrets. And now we return to our question, will chimps ever be smarter than humans? Well, by some definitions, they already are. There's also a school of thought that says we cannot truly know the intelligence of other animals without being inside their heads. However, assuming their intelligence is roughly where we estimate it to be, it seems unlikely that they will ever catch up. Our technology is increasing at a far greater rate than the crude tools used by chimps, and evolution simply takes too long for them to catch up the old-fashioned way. If chimps are to be seen as more intelligent than us, they'll need to wait for someone to help them along. So keep an eye on the Professor and James Franco.
In 1859, Charles Darwin published his book called The Origin of Species, which laid out his theory of evolution by natural selection. Quite simply, organisms change over long periods of time in response to their environment. Genetic variation causes slight differences within each new generation of a species. You are not a perfect copy of your parents.
Well, good for you, you're wrong.
Often, this variation does nothing, but sometimes it might just give that creature a small advantage. Perhaps the environment changes and there is not enough food for the species. A creature that was born with a genetic variation that made it smaller than others will then need less food. Because food is now scarce, that smaller creature has a better chance of surviving, reproducing, and passing on that smaller gene to its offspring. Over time, natural selection like this will begin to favor members of the species that are better suited to their new environment. Given enough time, these changes can result in entirely new species forming. This is evolution. Every generation is classed as the same species as its parents, but over the course of millions of years, these tiny, gradual changes do add up in a very big way. This process affects every living thing on the planet, including humans. In a century and a half since Darwin's book, many people still ask, did humans evolve from apes? My name is Danny Berg. Let's find out the answer, and also why that might not even be the right question, here on Life's Biggest Questions. One of the biggest misconceptions is that humans evolved from modern apes. The thing is, we are apes. Along with orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, and many other subspecies, we make up the ape family. So, if we didn't evolve from apes, where did we evolve from? Well, all species in the ape family share a common ape-like ancestor. Essentially, chimps, gorillas, and orangutans are our genetic cousins, and this common ancestor is like the great-great-great-grandparent of all of us. We know this because, for example, we share almost 99% of our genetic sequence with our closest relative, chimpanzees. There are now thousands of fossils that chronicle each split and progression from that single common ancestor that lived in Africa to all the modern apes we see today, including us. This single species began to split towards all these different groups as far back as 17 million years ago. The group that included human ancestors first split away from the group that would evolve into gibbons, then they split away from orangutan ancestors, then gorillas ancestors, and then finally, about 7 million years ago, a very important split happened. One group became the ancestors of modern day chimpanzees and bonobos, and the other started doing something very human-like. They started walking on two legs. This trait is known as being bipedal, making this branch a lot more human-like. So, why did this happen? Well, if you remember at the start of the video, we talked about how evolution is stimulated by environmental change. And for this distant ancestor of ours living in Africa all those millions of years ago, their environment certainly did change. They lived in the trees of dense rainforests that were rapidly disappearing due to natural climate change as the planet got cooler and drier. Out on the new African savanna with no trees to climb for protection, our ancestors needed to run from predators. There's also some evidence to suggest that if you're not swinging between trees, walking on two legs uses less energy than knuckle walking on four, another advantage for our ancestors. It's hotly debated among anthropologists about when exactly the first true upright walker lived, but the one that everyone can agree on is that a species known as Australopithecus regularly walked upright about 4 million years ago. But other than walking upright, Australopithecus still weren't very human-like. They had small brains, were mainly herbivores, and couldn't speak. We know this by studying fossils, such as one of the most famous fossils of all time, an Australopithecus named Lucy, found in 1974. She was named after the Beatles song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds that was playing at the dig site. But evolution is a relentless process. Things continue to change, and about 2.5 million years ago, the fossil records tell us that a new species had emerged, Homo habilis. If you think the first part of that sounds familiar, then you might be thinking of Homo sapiens, better known as us, humans. That's no accident either. At the moment, they're regarded as the first member of the Homo family, and all subsequent members are notably more human-like than anything before Homo habilis. Homo habilis had smaller teeth and a smaller jaw, much closer to ours. Their hands were more similar too, and with these human-like hands and bigger brains, they did something that none before them had. They made tools. Their name, Homo habilis, literally means handyman because of this. Then came Homo erectus about 1.8 million years ago. Although they still had protruding jaws, thick brows and no chin, they were even closer to us humans with their larger brains and skeletons that were now perfect for full-time bipedal walking. And walk they did, as Homo erectus is widely regarded as the first to boldly go where none had gone before and leave Africa. They crossed out into Southeast and East Asia, reaching India and China too, possibly following their hunting prey with their new improved tools and weapons. Homo erectus is also thought to have started intentionally using fire for the first time, for warmth, protection, and most importantly, to cook their food. Cooking food releases far more calories in that food, and with all these spare calories, over time, this led to a growth in brain size. Over the next million years, these humanoids began to split into smaller distinct groups, such as Homo heidelbergensis, who were thought to be the first species to bury their dead, and also use very primitive language. They were very successful, and their advanced hunting tools and more complex social interactions helped them spread into Europe, where they gradually evolved into Neanderthals, and into Asia, where they became Denisovans. At this point, there were now a number of different humanoid groups living on the planet, coexisting for many thousands of years. And then, 130,000 years ago, the African population of Homo heidelbergensis had evolved into Homo sapiens, who are the direct precursors to Homo sapiens sapiens, otherwise known as us, humans. If you look at the skeletons of these genetic cousins of ours, they almost seem indistinguishable to modern day humans, but there were differences between them. They were shorter and stockier than most humans, an adaptation to the cold weather in the northern hemisphere at that time. But in other ways, they were remarkably similar to us, and not the loutish cavemen popularized in the mainstream media over the years. They used complex tools, buried their dead, and likely had speech and language closer to ours than the grunts of Homo heidelbergensis. And then, 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other Homo groups began to disappear from the fossil records, until the only ones left on the planet were us. So what happened? Did they all just die out? Well, yes, no, and we really don't know. At that time, the climate was fluctuating rapidly across the world, going from mild to freezing cold every few generations or less. The Neanderthals were already scattered into small, isolated groups when humans arrived on the scene. Humans had spent a while building up their numbers in Africa, allowing them to form complex social groups where they could quickly gain and share knowledge. This gave us a number of slight advantages over Neanderthals, and we developed better tools, more complex languages, intricate art to communicate between groups and across generations. The unforgiving climate and these behavioral differences, rather than physical, meant that humans began to move into the areas of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other hominids and begin to outcompete them to extinction. But our genetic cousins aren't completely gone. Before humans outlasted them, they interbred with them. These days, studies have found that about 4% of many humans' DNA is Neanderthal, Denisovan, or even other, as of yet unidentified humanoid species. So for a lot of humans today, these weren't just groups that existed alongside our ancestors, they are also our ancestors in a very real way, living on within our DNA. And so too is the DNA of all who came before us. From Homo erectus to Australopithecus to our common ancestor with chimpanzees some 7 million years ago, and the ancestor of all modern apes 17 million years ago. We did not evolve from modern apes of today. We share a common ancestor. We are still trying to piece together the puzzle of our family history that goes back all those millions of years. New discoveries are being made all the time in both genetics and archaeology that mean our understanding of human evolution changes as often as 1 year to the next as we fill in the blanks in our history. Still, there is so much left to understand about us, the hairless apes that climb down from the trees and learn to walk, talk, create, and ask some of life's biggest questions.
For nearly a century, our civilization has been obsessed with the idea of a large, hairy, mysteriously elusive creature that lives deep within the dense woodland and remote mountain landscapes across the planet. The Yeti, the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, the wild ape-like race of giant bipedal humanoids that have manifested in the whisperings of folklore and oral tradition for thousands of years. But have you ever heard of the skunk ape? No? Well, I wouldn't besmirch you if you hadn't, but as fate would have it, the peculiar place known only as Florida has their own Yeti mascot, and generations of Floridians are absolutely convinced that the skunk ape is a very real creature out in the Everglades and unforgiving forests of the Sunshine State. But what if all of those people were actually onto something? Well, let's find out. Hello internet and welcome back to the most inquisitive channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions. As per usual, I'll be your disembodied floating voice Jack Finch, as today we kick back on our deck chair and curiously ask the question, what if the skunk ape was real? Can't talk about the skunk ape without addressing the root of the folklore legend, because let's not beat around the bush, these guys are two peas in a pod, a chip off the old block, an apple that doesn't fall far from the tree. That doesn't really work, but you get the picture. The Sasquatch, in its original urban legend, is a large and mysterious humanoid creature purported to inhabit the wild and forested areas of Oregon and the west coast of North America. The name Sasquatch comes from an anglicization of the name Saskets, from the Halkaleam language spoken by First Nations people in southwestern British Columbia. It makes sense then that legend permeated its way across North America, and across the continent, any dense areas of isolated woodland or remote areas quickly became synonymous with the Sasquatch legend. Most people who believe in these creatures or claim to have seen one assert that they are hair-covered bipeds with ape-like features up to 8 feet tall that leave correspondingly large footprints, hence the name Bigfoot. They are generally characterized as non-aggressive animals whose shyness and human-like intelligence make them elusive and thus rarely seen, though some wilderness travelers claim to have smelled their stench or heard their screams and whistles. That stench is pretty important because enter the skunk ape, also known as the swamp cabbage man, stink ape, swamp ape, Miaka ape, Florida Bigfoot, or my personal favorite, the swamp squatch, which is the closest to Sam Squanch, and no, it's not Sam Losco. Reports of the skunk ape were particularly common in the 1960s and 1970s, and it reached a critical mass in 1974, where sightings of a large, foul-smelling, hairy, ape-like creature which ran upright on 2 legs were reported en masse in suburban neighborhoods of Dade County. In actual fact though, it was down to the skeptical investigator Joe Nickell, the man responsible for debunking numerous paranormal cases across North America, who reported that the numerous sightings of the skunk ape were actually misinterpreted sightings of the black bear, and determined that it was likely that the other sightings were misidentifications of the same wildlife. But what if old Joe Nickell didn't know his black bear from his elbow? What if our man was merely an expert of not seeing the forest for the trees, and by burying his head in the sand, damned an intelligent species to near extinction? Let me explain. In the Everglades of Florida, the area most hotly considered the stomping ground for the skunk ape is a place known as Big Cypress National Preserve, an area that encompasses 720,000 acres of swamp and grassland. However, that comprises an even larger area of the Big Cypress Swamp that makes up nearly an absolutely massive 1,000,000 acres of isolated, remote, unprotected land. That's a lot of space for a skunk ape to hide, right? And it's also a lot of space for an endangered species to be threatened by climate change and environmental damage. Let me introduce you to Dave Shealy, a man who is, for all intents and purposes, the cryptid conservation equivalent of Jane Goodall, you know, Gorillas in the Mist, just with smelly cabbage creatures. And he insists that right now there are between 7 and 9 skunk apes roaming wildly amongst the Everglades. According to Shealy, an average male skunk ape reportedly stands 6 to 7 feet tall and weighs roughly 450 pounds. Females are considerably smaller, standing only 5 to 6 feet tall and weighing only up to 250 pounds. Both sexes of the skunk ape are covered in long reddish or black hair, similar to that of an orangutan or gorilla, and stand upright on 2 legs. According to him, Dave Shealy has seen a skunk ape on 3 separate occasions, and to him, the evidence is startling. After spending his life in the Big Cypress Swamp, he's made countless castings of their footprints and has even collected seasonal stool samples, their poo indicating that the skunk apes are omnivorous and that their diet consists of mainly bird nestlings, wild hogs and native Floridian berries. Since his first sighting at the age of 10, Dave Shealy has been documenting his methods on how to bait skunk apes. He's even compiled these tips into his Everglades Skunk Ape Research Field Guide, and his tips include instructions on how to properly wet lime lima beans, allegedly the skunk ape's favourite treat, and a stern reminder to always store deer liver on ice, in case you ever need to entice one. The thing is, if the skunk ape was real, Dave Shealy would very rapidly become the leading expert in skunk ape conservation. Because for Dave, the skunk ape is a very real and very endangered species. Since 2016, the Big Cypress National Preserve has been under threat of private companies drilling for oil and gas. Massive trucks plough along nearly 1,000 miles of new trails on a daily basis while the companies conduct their seismic testing, and the potential devastation to Florida's delicate ecosystem is an ever-growing threat looming on the horizon. If the skunk ape was real and things continued as they are, we may not ever truly know of their existence. And what a shame that would be.
Today we'll be answering the question, what if the Gigantopithecus didn't go extinct? Some refer to these creatures as our real-life King Kong, while others claim it's what Bigfoot looks like. Either way, we're going to be jumping into this one and answering how the Gigantopithecus would affect our world and society if it were to rule the jungle today. Now, it's believed chimpanzees have the strength anywhere between 5 to 8 times that of a human. There's no denying apes in general, gorillas, chimpanzees, and orangutans are incredibly strong. With that being said, to date, one of the strongest chimpanzees that's been in captivity was named Boma. In 1926, Boma pulled 847 pounds using just his right hand. Boma was just 165 pounds himself. Another instance proving chimps' true strength is when a former circus chimp, Suzette, made a pull of 1,258 pounds. It's believed she pulled almost 10 times her weight, meaning she most likely weighed around 125 pounds, maybe a bit more, so we could say up to 150 pounds. So what would that mean in regards to the strength of the Gigantopithecus? Well, they were believed to be approximately 9 to 10 feet tall and weigh around 1,200 pounds. Assuming they too could pull up to 10 times their weight, these beasts would be capable of pulling things weighing over 12,000 pounds. In other words, they'd be one of the strongest animals known to man. But strength aside, their height would also give them an incredible advantage over the likes of gorillas, who can allegedly carry things up to 4,400 pounds. The difference is gorillas are usually 5 feet tall, so these things would be almost 3 times as strong and tall as a gorilla. Although King Kong was written to be over 100 feet tall, the Gigantopithecus really would be the modern day Kong, although Bigfoot would most likely be a better comparison. So now that we got the stats, let's talk about how this beast roaming the land would affect us. As always, it really depends where you live. I feel like I say that in every video, but it's true. In today's society, these things would be living in the likes of India, Vietnam, China, and Indonesia. Meaning, if you lived in North or South America, you probably wouldn't be affected too much. The Middle East and any country in Africa probably wouldn't be affected either. But how would these beasts roaming the grassy lands of India, Vietnam, China, and Indonesia change the way things currently are? For starters, what would these things eat? Tigers? Buffalo? Maybe rhinos? Think again. Based off of the teeth found belonging to these species, there's a widespread belief they ate a lot of bamboo. Although they had incredibly strong teeth and jaws, a large majority were found to have cavities. It seems they would have the same diet as the giant panda. There's also the possibility that these monstrosities ate fruits when bamboo was unavailable. I know, I'm just as surprised as you guys. I thought these things would run the show, but apparently they aren't carnivores. But this also could have been because they were roaming the earth back when the likes of the Colombian mammoth, the cave hyena, and the short-faced bear, which was about 12 feet tall, roamed the earth. Not to say these chimps couldn't hold their own, but if they were hanging out in trees, why go fight for food when it's literally in your home? Nowadays, however, things would most likely be very different. With the likes of leopards and snakes living in the trees, I have no doubt these monsters would make a meal of them. Whether or not they enjoyed it would be an entirely different question, but if a leopard is attacking one of these things, you can be sure it wouldn't be much of a fight. Spoiler alert, I don't think the leopard would win. Now, assuming they stuck to their diet and only ate meat when they were defending themselves, the Gigantopithecus may drive the giant panda to extinction. Clearly, between the two, the giant panda would be seen as a victim if there was an altercation over bamboo, for example. As of now, the giant panda is no longer an endangered species as it once was. However, this would most likely change, assuming not only their food supply slowly diminished, but making it nearly impossible for them to get food if it meant going toe-to-toe with the Gigantopithecus. Like most forest animals, I don't think the countries would have to worry about these animals roaming the streets, especially considering how they hang out in the trees. They wouldn't want to wander into the city streets. But when it came to tourism or camping or even indigenous tribes living out in the wild, there may be some issues. Anyone who were to get close to these animals could be seen as a threat, and although tour guides, for example, are well equipped with tranquilizers and such to help protect those in case of a confrontational situation, these beasts would change the game. A regular tranquilizer would not be strong enough to take this thing down, nor would 2 or 3, meaning research would need to be done to figure out not only how to control these things in regards to their behavior and how aggressive they are towards humans, but how they could possibly affect the ecosystem in general. Due to their large size, they were believed to consume a lot of food. The reason they went extinct? Loss of food supply and not being able to adapt to rising temperatures. As we know, the temperature keeps rising, which would be seen as an issue for these guys. This could lead to the animals constantly moving to find new appropriate habitats that can sustain them. Unfortunately, even if they didn't go extinct about 100,000 plus years ago, there's a very real possibility they would go extinct in today's day and age based on climate change alone. Now thankfully, this is a big old what if. These things are long gone, and we're still finding their fossils over 100,000 years later. As we find out more information on these beasts, we'll have a better understanding of their habits and behaviors. Until then, we get to keep making fun hypothetical videos like this one, which makes my job quite fun.